topic I'm super excited about. Death of a game. New World. Is the end. Let's see how it dies. Death of a game. Who is this by? nerdSlayer Studios. I'm already gonna like this. Cool intro.
Sometimes, despite signs of life, a game is far more dead than we realize. In moments like that, I have to be willing to stake my name on what I believe to be a certain future for the game in question. New World is a game I have a personal history with, being an alpha tester who even stepped foot into their game studios. So no matter how this comes across, you can trust it's from a person with a perspective on the whole thing.
Okay.
New World, developed by Amazon Game Studios and published by Amazon, is an MMORPG survival-style action game that launched back in September of 2021. New World initially would wow the internet with impressive visuals and sounds.
It is lacking a lot of survival aspects to the game for it to be a survival game. If the players feel like the running is too much, that means the game is not portraying itself as a survival game. For example, take Valheim. Valheim is a survival game. In Valheim, even though like you can be like four islands away and die and spawn at your home, and you won't feel like it's that punishing versus dying in New World like I don't know, 2 minute walk away from base. Not even like 30-second walk from base. It feels more punishing than being 4 islands away from your spawn point and die.
Having an impressive near million-person peak player count on Steam, before plummeting in only a few months, down 90% of its player base. Why was New World unable to sustain its massive initial successes?
Because it sucked. Because the game is bad. The gameplay is good, but the game is bad. There's nothing to do at max level except grinding the same fucking mob. The item level system is bad. It's like in order to get a higher item level, you need to have a certain item level. Again, good on paper, really bad in practice. Like you can't target a high item level. You have to just go and fucking farm the same mob over and over to fucking improve. Right? If people didn't enjoy the crafting for some odd reason they do, the game would have died way before it did. Like people getting 200 in like their fucking crafting and gathering and all that shit. If they didn't, they would leave the game even earlier. I don't know why people enjoy that aspect of the game so much, but fuck it, whatever. Let them enjoy whatever they enjoy. Maybe what's that game called? With the islands that all the chicks play. that's that's probably the game that they would enjoy as well. Like, fuck, what is that game called? Oh, I can't remember it right now. God damn. It's gonna bother me. All right. Anyways, yeah, I have no idea why people enjoy this game. Again, as gameplay wise, the game is amazing. Now, why did it fail? Aside from what I already mentioned, all the bugs and abuses. That was like the last straw. The economy is fucked up. Botting. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just like the game just is overall. It just doesn't have anything to offer for anyone who played over like a month.
Why am I featuring it on the series before it's technically dead yet, besides that not being the only requirement to make the series? Well, detectives and those new to the channel, you will have to wait to find out more, as we will uncover the biggest clues and present our evidence at the very end of the episode for the final deduction concerning the largest contributing factors for the death of a game, New World.
Let's go.
Stay tuned to the very end of the episode to catch a hint on what the next episode might be. Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome our sponsor for this video.
Geology?
It's Geology. Geology is a 9-time award-winning men's skincare product recognized in the Men's Health, Esquire, and Ask Men Grooming Awards. With 5,000 plus 5-star reviews, Geology creates a simple, effective skincare routine customized just for you. You just click the link provided and fill out a 30-second diagnostic quiz with, in just a few clicks, you tell them about your skin goals, and then a team of dermatologists will design a regimen just for you to be shipped directly to your door. It's that simple. This skincare routine helps you fight acne, reduce oiliness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes. As somebody with chronic dark under eyes and dry skin, I really enjoy Geology's skincare product because it helps me feel refreshed in the morning and at night. Not only
Actually, I could use something like that for my dark eyes. Like, holy fuck. Like chronic at this point. I can't not have them.
Take the free skincare quiz to save up to 50% off on your 30-day trial. Even better, join their Geology Galaxy community.
I'll actually look into Geology after this.
And more at discord.gg/geology. Thanks again to Geology for sponsoring today's video, and back to the mystery detectives. Amazon Game Studios, which is where the story begins, was formed back in 2012. When Amazon bought action shooter developer Double Helix 2 years later in 2014, they got a head start. Double Helix was founded back in 2007 and had mostly forgettable titles like Battleship and Silent Hill Homecoming, but managed something half decent with Killer Instinct back in 2013.
Oh shit,
Double Helix would form the backbone of Amazon Game Studios. Amazon had only ever sold games as a distributor, but had expressed more interest in creating their own video game developer in-house, which explained the AGS initiative. AGS, or Amazon Game Studios, initially would create mobile games and otherwise not so noteworthy titles.
Yeah.
But that's not Amazon enough.
But they look good.
September of 2016, and Amazon would announce not just one, but 3 major titles, including one we have already covered on the series, Crucible, and one that we are covering on this episode, New World. New World was set to be a sandbox survival MMO based on the colonization of the Americas with a supernatural twist. New World was described as allowing players to choose between playing as a farmer, a crafter, or an adventurer, as well as focus on building camps and towns to survive the harsh environment. Even the journalist describing the game in their article likened it to Rust, or an Ark-type MMO with colonialism thrown in there. Whatever you were likening it to, an MMORPG is one of the most complex genres, and Amazon was signing up right at the top. Amazon being willing to jump right into the field might be super exciting, but no matter how much money they would put in, if they didn't understand how an MMORPG works, then it would be mostly for naught. We've seen this happen time and time again on the series, with big players entering the online space, only to leave with their tail between their legs. There were next to no details concerning New World for the next 2 years following the announcement, as typically expected of an MMO that can sometimes have a development cycle of 5 years. Instead, one of the announced titles
if everything
was
goes smoothly, 5 years.
Breakaway, which I managed to also alpha test and never let people forget about it because it was their earliest failure, them being AGS, was being shut down before it even launched back in March of 2018. This apparently would now bring more focus.
See, the problem with, from what I can see on that game, because I don't even know what that game is, it looks like it was built for esports, and I don't think you should build a game for esports. I think the game should be good, and the community will naturally make it an esport, and then you can use that to make your own esport.
To the other 2 titles, Crucible, and relevant for our story.
I mean, it's a PvP game regardless, so it's like it's naturally can be an esport, but you don't need to force it to be one.
New World. June 15th, 2018 is when I personally enter the story, and while there's not always an inside scoop on the death of a game series, on
that lazy peon? That's the lazy peon, isn't it? Isn't it lazy peon? I'm assuming that's him. But that looks like lazy peon.
Special occasions like this, we get a view from the inside from your trusty local neighborhood detective. AGS would contact a few of us streamers or YouTubers, and mostly guys who played survival games and a couple MMO players, and have us fly out to their studios in Irvine, California. Not only would we become alpha testers, we were some of the earliest and highest profile testers stepping foot into the test studio that, by the way, used to be a breakaway esports room for our 4-hour-long sessions that we took. That version of New World was far more raw than what people were probably used to or exposed to. You didn't have set cities, instead you had building, and you could build freeform-wise like a
Oh,
true
okay, that's the
survival game.
survival
There was
aspect.
next to no lore in the game, and there was barely any
There
points
is
of
no
interest.
lore in the game.
On top of that, it utilized a criminal system where you could flag and then kill another player and take their drop stuff. At this point, I already recognized that New World's team was utilizing an outdated criminal system, and because of this, the system would probably be easily exploited. I tried to show this to developers by running around and PKing the other content creators on repeat, and in my feedback I also made sure to mention that it was a problem. If you study other MMORPGs of the past, you should know that you can't trust players to make good decisions without building a system to facilitate such. If you have a criminal system with no nuance other than being flagged or not, inevitably people will abuse such a simple system. It's frustrating because people think it's indicative of a PvP-focused game just being destined for failure, but in my opinion it has more to do with the fact that the criminal system itself, like other systems presented in New World sadly, by 2018 was already outdated by easily 15 years. Other things mentioned for feedback for New World by content creators were more lore and just reasons to care about the world in general. Sure, it was a sandbox, but there still needed to be more in that sandbox to make people care about building in said sandbox. We also echoed in unison that we enjoyed the Dark Souls combat approach that was more prevalent early on in the game, and felt like New World should lean more into that, as well as take inspiration in the dangerous world that we were discovering, which felt at the moment pretty empty and lifeless, but could have a certain Dark Souls element to it that would be pretty enjoyable. It felt like all in all it was a really productive feedback session. How much they took in the end, of course, we don't really know, but we did sit in front of pretty much the major developers on the project and sat up individually and gave our piece. Sometime near the end of 2019, New World would shift the game to a buy-to-play business model pre-launch from a free-to-play one. There's a bit of speculation as to why this is.
I'm totally fine with that. No monthly charge, buy it once and you play as much as you want. I think that's honestly most games should be like that, and that's actually a pretty good design in my opinion.
Such as lack of faith in the product, and I don't think that it's ever been properly addressed.
The only reason I would say I'm against free-to-play is because if free-to-plays will have more bots. Does New World have a lot of bots? Yes, of course it has a lot of bots, but think about it this way. How much more money would the devs make if they ban bots and bots have to rebuy the game to join rather than just remake a new account? A lot more money.
But AGS would allow the early backers of the game at least to get it for free. Nearly 2 years after I reported the issue to New World devs when testing their game, they would finally respond to the criticism and rampant PK issues in their game, January 2020, by shifting the game completely away from PvP altogether, by straight removing the criminal system.
Hardcore PvP is not happy? Yeah, fuck them. Who gives a shit? You're a hardcore PvP player, go play Warzone some shit.
To some players, and while in some ways it was more of a band-aid.
The thing is, like, there's so many PvP games out there, there's a massive lack of PvE games, and in my opinion the MMORPG genre should be PvE focused with PvP as an attraction, not as a focus.
Fix instead of fleshing out the criminal system and attempting to add like karma to it and fix it, they just removed the whole thing. But it's not a real solution because New World was primarily built on conflict, through creating bases and places you live and operate out of and then fighting over these. That was kind of the point of New World. It lacked any real storytelling and even basic questing. It felt like the AGS team, with the PvP changes, were just taking their ball and going home. This meant that AGS a year before launch was going to drastically switch the focus of New World in the way that we haven't really seen before. From PvP sandbox to PvE theme park. Something game director Scott Lane confirmed in one of the developer chats that were released. With Crucible shut down already, AGS was 2 for 3 on failed games, with New World not even launched yet but already suffering from immense issues. A lot was riding on New World being a success, which was originally set to launch May 2020, but then delayed significantly following the PvP changes and the feedback received from testers all the way to spring 2021. AGS would express a desire to add more features and content, including more middle and in-game experiences, because there just weren't any. Sandbox games don't typically need them as much because the players can flesh that content out themselves. This would give New World roughly a year to shift their game to a more PvE-centric MMO, which arguably wouldn't be enough time. To elaborate, another large non-ignorable issue with switching to a PvE-centric typical MMO in-game content model design style, that's a mouthful, is that it's one that's not particularly long-lasting. Think of in-game raids and dungeons. After you've completed them a few times, you don't really have a reason to redo them. The shelf life on that sort of content is very short, and thus it's a bit of a perishable good. Think of the sandbox MMO as more of non-perishable goods, because the players can constantly create their own content, thus it's long-lasting. New World suddenly shifting from a sandbox-style game to a more theme park-style game wasn't exactly an easy switch. Theme park content is quite competitive and extremely expensive, but my hypothesis on it is that it's not sustainable due to design. It's very hard to do sustainably with the constant drive for more content and bigger and better content. In fact, the only developers who have done it realistically are pretty much the biggest developers in the space, because they can afford it. New World was going to struggle to just walk into an entirely new different game direction and compete with the likes of Square Enix, ZeniMax Online, ArenaNet, and even Jagex. After taking a year off to refocus the game, the start of 2021 wasn't any kinder to Amazon Game Studios, as the company would be plagued with reports of severe dysfunction within the studio amidst the shift in design. Surely New World had immense pressure on it, with 2 of the 3 gaming efforts of AGS already being major failures, and outlets like Bloomberg questioning if they could even make a good game in the first place. While Amazon is pouring $500 million into video game development, not only are there calls of dysfunction, there's also accusations of toxic.
Amazon Game Studios accused of chronic mismanagement and fostering a toxic bro culture. Bro, but like the devs are bros, man. Like how many female devs do you think they have there? They're doing the coding.
Bro culture concerning Amazon Game Studios.
Oh my god,
too.
man.
It felt like Amazon's
Like they're all dudes. They're gonna have a bro culture by default. Fuck, man. Like what's wrong with bro culture? As long as they're not harassing the female employees, I mean.
desire to skip through the process a bit by buying its way through, they had seemingly picked wrongly in their leadership. For starters, they didn't even pick a leader with gaming experience. You heard that right.
Yeah,
Mike Frazzini, the leader of the games division at the time, hadn't even made a game before.
That's
According
not
to
good.
a Bloomberg report, Frazzini would reportedly frustrate developers with basic takes and had trouble differentiating between gameplay and concept footage.
Oh my
But
god.
that's not the worst of it. Sure, upper leadership guy without hands-on experience and being out of touch isn't the craziest thing. Head of games department or not, right? I think the worst of it is when you start to peek into the portfolios and experience of the other experienced game developers tasked on Amazon. Head of games department or not.
One
right?
second.
I think the worst of it is when you start to peek into the portfolios and experience of the other.
Why does this look familiar? Why does this look a lot like World of Warcraft's Dragonflight presentation?
Other experienced game developers tasked on Amazon's new MMORPG New World. Let's start with the game director featured quite prominently, Scott Lane. Scott was a producer who worked on wrestling games, shooters, and a few top RPGs. Not online RPGs or MMOs in sight, though. Well, that's fine, he's a producer. What about the actual developers, right? Well, the design lead worked on Killer Instinct and Silent Hill Homecoming. The combat lead had a similar history because, well, Amazon acquired Double Helix, and these are Double Helix developers. Well, that's fine if they have someone experienced as a game systems
That Angry Joe.
leader, they could just teach the other
Angry
developers
Joe
how the systems work. Gears of War? And the dude's primarily an artist for a systems designer? At this point, I started to just dig deeper out of curiosity, and a deep growing sadness sinking within. The UX lead was a Madden developer. The world lead was about the only guy with MMO experience. Just too bad it was a failed MMO, Defiance. The narrative leader?
Still something.
No
At least he
credits.
knows why it
Even
failed,
the
maybe.
AI lead has a lacking position, with a developer who was previously a character designer. Now, my intention is not to announce all of these developers are just incapable of offering good perspectives, or they suck, or whatever else. My point is that why would you pump this much money into video game development for one of the most ambitious games in game development, and then hire essentially nobody with actual MMO experience? It's like if I was some billionaire who
Yeah.
entered into the phone business, but I never actually used or was familiar with industry standards in phones. You can probably assume no matter how much money I would pour into it, my phone wouldn't be competitive for a number of reasons, no matter how many flip phone companies I would acquire. And when I encountered common problems, I wouldn't know how to deal with them due to just having no experience. Alright, we can just ditch the crappy phone analogy. The point is here is that New
Crappy or not was actually a decent analogy, which is like, yeah, like you're buying flip phone companies, but everyone's on smartphones.
World is being helmed by guys with no MMO experience. That's
Yeah.
absolutely ludicrous to me on its own, because Amazon can just pay themselves out of that problem quite easily.
Yep.
But on top of that, I don't even know how many MMOs these devs were even playing or had played. That
True.
might sound like I'm just making a bold claim and just going a little bit too far, but I'm
But considering their initial goal of what the game was supposed to be, it wasn't supposed to be like an MMO. Like it was, but it wasn't, right? Like the game concept was not supposed to be MMO-esque. It was supposed to be more combat, more war and stuff like that. It wasn't so much like settlements and all that stuff and or story. It was just like, here's some mobs, but mainly you guys are killing yourself. You're killing the mobs for material, not so much for anything else.
basing it off of a few things. For starters, I've spoken to devs, and I spoke to one that worked at SOE, and he stated that it's fairly common on MMOs for people making decisions to have no MMO experience, let alone development experience.
Yeah.
Secondly, when I was
Which would make a lot of sense about World of Warcraft. I mean, heck, Ian Hazikostas, great raid designer, don't get me wrong. He was just a WoW player and he was working in a law firm. So now he's the lead game dev. So I don't know if he's doing a good job, but as far as I know, the game is not going too well. Maybe raid design was his strong suit and should have stayed there. I don't know. Not the whole like stay in your own lane kind of thing, but it's like stay in where you're strong, man. It's fine.
was at the AGS office, I
Lead
noticed that when I
raid
made certain,
designer is
in my
also like
opinion, industry
good
standard or
appeal.
well-received feature remarks, and the industry, and reference them, the devs seem to be quite impressed. While I take my testing job quite seriously, and of course I think highly of myself, contract pay or not, many of the things I was offering as advice and ideas for AGS were just lifted from some of my favorite MMOs, like Arcage and Star Wars Galaxies and Warhammer and
But seriously, yeah, it's like don't fix what's not broken. Take the good things out. If you're making a new game completely, take the things that work and put it in your MMO. Don't take the things that don't, and you're good. Don't take the liabilities. Take only the positives.
even other survival games like Rust and Conan Exiles.
Yeah.
I could be reading too much into that, but I think that the story of New World is one of a bunch of likely talented developers who think or thought they could make an MMORPG without actually learning how, or going through the process on
Or
a smaller
playing one.
scale. Whether that's the fault of leadership and trusting in the wrong people, or the developers taking on something just too
Like do what Yoshi P did. Play WoW during your development.
grand. Who knows? New World would face another delay in February of 2021, this time to August in the fall. Instead, AGS would
That's
utilize
fine.
this time to close beta test New World, which isn't a bad idea. The reason we have to cover delays as a negative thing is New World was set to launch a year before.
Whatever.
It's one thing to have a delay or two, but by the point the game is nearing years off its initial targeted launch date, which just screams that it wasn't very realistic to begin with.
No, their vision changed. I don't know, man. Like the vision changes, shit happens, man. Like I totally like, man. Just wait for the game to be ready. Just stop asking for games to be released early because right now New World is where it's at, probably because released too early and wasn't tested enough. And now it's in the gutter and dude, it is good luck to it coming back. If Amazon doesn't shut it down and it lasts for a few years, maybe it'll come back because the combat system is good, but everything else is fucking dog shit.
Closed beta in the summer was supposed to highlight what
Yeah,
New
Dan
World
Bilzerian.
had in store, with their shift to a more PvE-centric theme park style game, and all of that. What it showcased was simplistic questing that seemed to take all of 30 minutes to write and come up with, where you must go here, interact with the same objects over and over again, or do the PvP variant where you run here and...
The thing is, if they didn't plan to make it a PvE experience, don't. Not in the sense like you don't have to do all these quests. Like just make mob killing XP way higher and just send people to hunt shit. Like, hey, we want to explore this new zone for materials and whatever, because this is all it is. It's like colonialism, right? It's like exploring the Americas. That's all it is. And then you find treasure there, and you find equipment there, and there's a mini boss, shit like that. Just like, you don't have to make it a quest game again. Just make bounties, you know? Like, I don't know, man. It's like, you don't have to complicate it.
And then stand there.
If you don't have a story for the game, fuck the story, man. Just the gameplay can be the fun itself, right? It's like, you can have the minimal story of, like, and the story can even appear not from quests but from you discovering something. You go to a place and you see some ritual, and then you go and you start like asking people about what it could be, and then it's like the village chief is like, yo, I need you to go and fucking investigate that shit, go hunt on their tracks. And then you go and you hunt for tracks and blah blah blah. Then you go and you find the dungeon, then you do the dungeon, boom, that's a full quest. 3 to 4 to 5 levels, depends on XP, whatever, like 1 to 5 levels worth of XP right there, just from this simple quest of like, hey, I stumbled upon a ritual. It's like, hey, someone stole something from me. It's like, on your way back, it's like there's a cinematic and just someone stole something from you and you have to get it back or some shit. And it takes you through like caves where there's a bunch of mobs that you kill, treasure to find. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated. You do not need all of these quests, man. It's like, it's not needed. Quests are cool, but they're too. I mean, cool is debatable, but it's like they're simplistic. If your game is focused on combat, stick with your strength. Do the combat shit. Make people fight more.
There for 2 minutes.
And the combat,
Very impressed.
and the combat here is really the appeal, not the questing. It's the combat.
With the changes, as there would be no reason effectively to even flag for PvP anymore, and the game's lackluster PvE wasn't going to help matters either. When I say that New World and closed beta actually had lackluster PvE, what I mean is just literally. I actually enjoyed the gameplay loop itself and had a good time. I thought it was quite fun to play when the guns still shot projectiles especially. The problem is that outside of that gameplay loop, there wasn't much redeeming concerning the PvE in New World to begin with. It was below the industry standard for the time and below standards even set by MMOs back in the early 2000s. There was next to no main story, very little individual story, and
not necessary, but yeah.
22 years old feeling. Say what you will about titles like TSW, SWTOR, ESO, and Final Fantasy XIV, but they upped the level of expectation for story and PvE
100%, I agree. I don't know about the other two, but like ESO and 14, yeah, story is a big part. But again, look at WoW. In my opinion, WoW story is dog shit. Plenty of people will still play it just because the gameplay is good. And it's like, there's content at the end that people are willing to do. Trust me, I hate fucking WoW right now. Like, fuck that game. Like, I don't want to play it again. And I probably will. Why? Because I'm a fucking addict. But but like, the story wise, it's like, it's mediocre at best. There's not much. There's like, they're just trying to go for like the WoW moments. I mean, they are WoW. They should be going for WoW moments, I guess. But like, you don't have to focus on story. You really don't. You don't have to focus on quest. You can just have the story kind of like tells itself as you explore the world.
RPGs. New World seemed to be a regression and seems to fail in comparison in everything but visuals in the action combat offering.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, throughout the closed beta on the nicest graphics cards, New World was literally breaking them, which is an absolutely horrible look, and to me screams not being properly optimized. As the August launch date would creep closer,
the breaking is
delay would hit New World. This time, a shorter month-long delay to focus on the game polish. When New World did launch, though, could we trust it was really ready after all of these delays?
Plenty of people did.
New World would launch globally September 28th, 2021, after some time being delayed. Finally,
By the way, Amazon controls bought almost all the high quality servers and like the most servers as well, and they could not get enough servers for New World. It's crazy.
AGS's final horseman was unveiled and set to try to wow the Twitch and MMORPG audience. According to Bezos and what I was told by AGS, the expectation for New World would be that it would remain a top 10 viewed title on Twitch. It was able to accomplish that temporarily, at least, even managing to impressively sell a few dozen million copies, according to Steam Spy. where on Steam it was able to peak at just under 1 million players peak and 500,000 average concurrently, making the top
Not bad.
10 most played list. New World on aggregate review website Metacritic would score a 70 out of 100 from 35 different critics, with a slightly poorer review score from users at 5.5 out of 10.
Yeah, because some would be like, yo, I've been playing it nonstop for 3 days and I'm out of things to do because I reached max level. And some are like, yo, my god, this is so much fun. All I'm doing is gathering and I'm still level 3.
Which isn't half bad at all and certainly salvageable, especially with
Not
that
for
amount
a
of players
release.
playing the game. PC Gamer, who gave
It's
New World a
salvageable, yeah.
60 out of 100, would state in closing that concerning the game,
Yeah,
New
PC Gamer
World's
is a bit more
engaging
honest.
crafting and faction rivalries are held back by abysmal PvE and a boring world.
Fair enough.
IGN, who would score the game the same, 6 out of 10, their review would claim New World is a very pretty survival MMORPG hybrid that saves its best moments for the endgame, but you have to be willing to grind like hell to get to them.
Saves its best moments for the end game. What end game is he talking about? Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure that whoever wrote this didn't get to end game. He just assumed that end game is where it's at.
Now, personally, I wouldn't trust a critical review on an MMORPG, as they typically don't even play anywhere close to the amount of hours you would need to play to form a
100%.
true opinion, but they also just historically are quite poor.
Yes.
Playing New World at launch felt actually worse than the previous installments in my eyes, because the combat and animations now felt a bit snappier and more typical MMO feeling, less Dark Souls-like, which is kind of what we all initially wanted and asked for. This would also create some undesired effects, such as the ability to make your character skate by quickly changing directions mid-movement. The reason that combat felt worse to me, though, really had to do with the fact that they shifted to hit scan over projectiles for performance issues. This made shooting a gun feel far less consistent with the setting and less easy to aim. Now, I'm a big proponent of hit scan in maybe a super competitive game, but when you're shooting a gun that actually has a projectile that actually takes time to travel there, why not just use the projectile? In my opinion, it really ruined the tempo of the gunplay in New World, which was some of the best, I think, in an MMORPG period. Still, despite these issues, New World had quite a strong start out of the gate. But as I always urge, and have urged historically, caution with rocket-like launches. An MMORPG is built on longevity, so the game doing well the first month is important to get some eyes on it, and to get some money in the developers' pockets so they can afford things, but it's not as important as doing well in a year. New World's last-minute shift to PvE-centric MMO wasn't going to hold up well compared to titles like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, and Elder Scrolls Online.
For what it's worth, I still think the decision to change to PvE was the right one. But like, they still should have focused on their combat system more. Like, make the game revolve around the combat system, not so much about the PvE. Like, PvE is fine. There's plenty of PvE games with shit story. You don't have to make it so story driven. You're not gonna be able to compete anywhere near close enough to something like Elder Scrolls that has a massive history, World of Warcraft that has a massive history, Final Fantasy that has a massive history. These games have been around for like, their stories have been around for like 30 plus years, each one of them. It's like, you're not gonna compete. You're not gonna make something as magnanimous in story as that. The only thing you could do is say this is very closely closely following the discovery of the Americas, or whatever it was called, the fucking colonialization or whatever. I don't know. I can't find the words. But if you want to do that, then you might have something there with a story to tell. But and like cool little events of history that that play in the game, but they are also supernatural now, right? Just like cool little tidbits of history that are like in a supernatural form. That might work. That might fly enough as lore and a story. But honestly, you can't do that. Just fuck it. Just like abandon ship. Do something else. You don't have to focus on story so much. Story in MMOs is great. It's not what keeps player there, in my opinion. It's the game has to be fun first and foremost.
So while it might grab the initial player base, I was hesitant in thinking it would keep them for very long due to lacking the name recognition and the story focus as the other titles previously mentioned. Within a month, those dreamy player counts were in a sharp decline, being reported on by even Forbes, down 62% to 357,000 players peak. AGS was even trying to give away copies for free in some people's eyes as a way to just keep the player counts up. Besides reasons already covered,
it's like they didn't know how brutal this environment was. Like everyone's against them. They don't even understand how many people want an MMO to fail. I'd say there are more people who want an MMO to fail than they want it to succeed, because it's more fun. It's more funny that way. Like, look at these idiots who thought this game would be the WoW killer. Look at these idiots who thought the Final Fantasy was worse than this stock shit. Look at your game dying. All these people who are like, and there's a lot more of them than there are of people who hope. And again, I don't like this cultism, but it is what it is.
why was New World losing population so quickly? Well, simply put, the grind put forth didn't feel worth it for most players. There wasn't enough endgame, and once you got to the endgame anyway, it just wasn't good enough.
Nothing
not compared to competitors. And AGS was sadly going to be incentivized from a progression standpoint to just slow progression from launch onward, which doesn't sound too crazy if that progression wasn't the same.
I can't believe they didn't go for territory controls as a similar to, how's that place called? Arakoa Forest or Eastern Wastelands, East Wastelands, no, some of that, whatever. The zone with the undead that you had like 5 towers to control. Similar to Hellfire Peninsula with the stadium, the Colosseum, and the tower, I think. Like shit like that. They could have easily made stuff like that, like faction-wise wars in the map.
Copy-paste quests and chests and some points of interest scattered about. The worst part is they didn't even have the guts to do this publicly. They chose to stealthily nerf progression during their first major update instead. AGS trying to address the PvP issues I and many others, I am sure, outlined early on after launch seemed just a too little too late thing. We already knew that.
Like I said, the XP for mob killing should be way higher. There's like, grinding XP is not fun. If you're doing a story, that's one thing, and like you're going through the story and whatever, and it's like you're enjoying the story and you're leveling up, that's fine. Grinding mobs over and over for XP should not be punishing. Like, it's brain dead activity, and trust me, people who get brain dead, they don't want to stay.
That people wouldn't PvP because they're
like
just
you feel your IQ
to.
dropping
And
as you play the game.
This not because of a crystal ball, but because of paying attention to other MMOs that have launched and studying their systems and audience reception to such. But New World felt like an MMORPG created just in a vacuum, with absolutely no market research done. And you can't just fix that with a few content patches.
That was a good kill. Done.
With the population down yet again, this time by December 2021 to 145,000 peak.
And again, probably 50,000 of those are bots.
Players, AGS was forced to merge some of their servers in New World already. They would then merge again later in the same month. And while merges aren't proof that the game is going to be shattered, they aren't really a good sign so early on. New World unmistakably was at a low player count. Some servers were down to just a few mere 100 players, even after the merges. Within 2 more months, the population would dip to 67,000 players by February of 2022. A month later, the former studio head of Amazon Game Studios, Mike Frazzini, would leave the company, citing a desire to spend more time with his family.
Mike got fired.
Was a bit of a lightning rod of Amazon Game Studios, but rightfully so, as the head of the studio having no prior game experience. Largely gaming for Amazon has been an abrupt failure. They're able to get initial successes, like with New World and Lost Ark, but within a few months, their populations drop down significantly. New World would announce their first big content update in the end of March, set for sometime
to start
soon
making some phone
in
calls.
the summer. The changes are set to bring a new weapon, more story quests, and content to the game. But the problem with the content update, besides it being a rather lean offering, is that, well, what I discussed earlier regarding perishable versus non-perishable goods. Because AGS pivoted New World towards a more perishable style of content, which isn't necessarily bad, it's just not sustainable by design. They were inherently going to be very reliant on content updates to succeed. This would put New World in a difficult position, as population has continued to shrink down now to 34,000 players peak, over 90%.
I also don't know, does New World even have raids? I know it has dungeons. Well, I know it has one dungeon max level, but does it even have raids? What's there to do at max level?
The population dropped at this point, and as less players play the game, AGS will likely have to put less money and time into the updates, which kind of creates that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
New World is on the ropes.
Death.
Even if you're a fan, you can't deny that losing over 90% of the population from launch isn't good. And with lean content offerings on the horizon, there's not much to be optimistic about the future of New World either. And I'm ready to put my name on it. I don't trust the developers much to salvage the product either, when most of the game's updates thus far are just focusing on fixing the game that they launched.
Yeah, that's the worst part, when you're just focusing on fixing the game. I mean, they can pull what's that spaceship game called? No Man's Sky. They might pull a No Man's Sky, but No Man's Sky was an indie, like a no affiliate type of business. They're working for Amazon. They get pressure from Amazon themselves, right? So
they haven't even had time to actually add something really new or innovative in the game because they're too busy fixing half-baked systems. Systems I frankly speaking don't have much faith of them delivering on. With too much of the same
not gonna lie, if you think about it, there's no way that this head
new or innovative in the
goes from here. Like, even if it starts crumbling, right?
Game because they're too busy.
You would think it would fall sideways, right? So see, the left head fell a bit.
Systems.
See, why did it? Okay, so right now, let's say this is still possible. Like, it fell, you know, at a slight angle, but from now on, you know, it would start shifting there, that way. Like, that's the angle, right? Or it would just stay like this.
Systems I frankly
But
speaking
at no point does the chin of the head move so far to the side, because it would tilt off the center, off the contact with the floor, right? So like, it doesn't make sense that the head. And now, like, it even went into the ground. Like, what the fuck? How does that even happen?
With too much of the sand.
What is this gravitational force?
To exist on its own with
fucking
slow
magic.
Or meager content updates, I believe it's on a further path towards its demise. That's the Music Detectives' final deduction time. Let's take the gathered clues and evidence and outline the largest contributing factors behind the death of a game, New World. AGS lacked proper...
I love that he completely disregarded the bugs that ruined the economy of the game.
MMO experience and developers. 180 to their game design during closed beta. Content design and offering has no longevity and it isn't competitive. Offers nothing innovative nor otherworldly worthy of the Amazon name.
It also, but it also doesn't charge like it's offering anything innovative.
Early to a launch. Displayed a severe lack of market and competitor research. It feels like it was just made in a vacuum. Now, the whole being made in a vacuum thing is honestly pretty bad, but the worst part about New World to me is the sheer scale of the failure. Hundreds of millions potentially, and yet the lack of market research is just appalling once you put it into perspective. How can you put that much money into an industry and not even hire the experts in what you're creating? Why not take the Eastern developer approach like Yoshi P or Yuji Naka did? Choose a few prominent online RPGs and just play the hell out of them as a team and study them. If you don't have MMO experience like they didn't, at least be
respect for mentioning Yoshi P.
But when are developers and bigwigs going to realize that video game developers isn't the same as an MMORPG video game developer?
Yep.
MMORPGs are the most complex genre for a reason.
Yeah, because they're extremely social. Like, you have to make so many different efforts. It's not like just making a good combat system. That's just like you can do with basically any game. It's like, just make the system for this game good. There's so much stuff that goes, like, it's a breathing world, right? Like, that's the whole point of like an MMORPG. the world is changing with or without your action, stuff like that. It's a political thing. It's a geopolitical thing actually. The world, what's it called, the seasons, the characters, like time moves on in this game. The game itself tells a story throughout time. No other game really does that, right? It's like you can say patches and stuff like that, tell a bit of a story. What did the story of League of Legends really change? Did time really move on? No one even knows. If you just play the game, you don't even know anything about the world. In my opinion, it didn't change. They completely went back on some of the stuff and changed a lot of the things in the League of Legends, in Runeterra, basically, in the history. Right? But it's like, is the world living and breathing? No. Is the world living and breathing in Warzone? No. It's the same fucking map, it's the same fucking season, it's the same fucking people with the same fucking guns. Like, what other games? FIFA. It's the same game since 2003 or some shit. You know, the world doesn't really change. Unlike an MMO where it's like there's so much to an MMO. Like, yeah, you can't just make it in without thinking. Like, you have to have like, I want to say a 4-year plan, not even a 2-year, not a 10-year. 10-year would be great eventually, but it's like at least a 4-year plan for the game development and how the world will change and shift based on what you think will happen.
They actually simulate
You have to be a
worlds. They have
prophet.
world persistence, massive amounts of players playing them and playing them simultaneously, and do things on a massive scale. This is far more complex than just a game with a guild system or a friends list. When Amazon comes into the space ignoring the rules and lessons learned by other MMORPGs, it's a painful but important lesson that no matter how big and powerful you are, you can't skip Go. You can't skip the process without paying your due diligence. And if you can't hire experienced MMO developers, as they can kind of be unicorns, at least hire some developers who passionately play MMOs. Or
Yep.
consult with people who do, and
Yeah.
actually listen. Thanks for watching, guys.
I mean, just because you do it doesn't mean you're a player. What's that? Let me see
Thanks for
that.
watching, guys.
Next case is what? Is that the game with the gods? Sky Rise or some shit?
Has just begun.
Oh, Godfall. Yeah, gods. Okay, close enough. Game with the gods. Alright, actually good video. Like that again, double like. But yeah, man, like you gotta come into an MMORPG with a bigger plan, take your time developing it, like, and especially with MMORPG. Oh, that's okay. I saw that. Especially with MMORPGs, it's like you need like such a long-term plan, and even if the game, like, you expect the game to be ready in 5, expect it to be done in 10, and if it's ready before, be happy about that. Like MMORPGs, they just require so much. It's like, I'm not even a game dev, like I don't even know, but it's like, just from like playing WoW for years, I know how much, and like WoW is like one of the best and worst examples in a successful MMORPG. It's just, in my opinion, the timing for WoW was by far its greatest contributor to its success. But even then, right? It's like after playing ESO, WoW, some Guild Wars 2 up until level 50-ish, and now Final Fantasy 14 for the last basically year straight. Yeah, man, like you cannot underestimate what goes into an MMORPG. Like it's a whole world. Like you're literally creating a world with a backstory, right? And it's like, and that backstory has to keep moving, and it's like it's evolving and changing. Yeah, it's a lot. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.